Welcome back to part 2 of Module 13, Lesson 3, where we're learning about rotations. I think you're going to like part 2 a lot more than part 1. Part 1, we had to very cumbrously rotate the different shapes around a point using your protractor and your ruler. For part 2, we're going to learn that as long as you're going around the origin, there's a better way to do it. The coordinates of an image rotated clockwise around an origin can be determined using coordinate notation. You don't have to measure anything. The rotation is a transformation around a fixed point called the center of rotation, and when a figure is rotated around the origin, the center of rotation is going to be 0.00. Each point of the original figure and its image are going to be the same distance from that point, the origin. So here we're going to take and look at a rotation, each clockwise rotation around the origin. So you can see at point A, all that they did is they took and reversed the order of the values so that x became y and y became x, and they gave it a negative. And this is when you're rotating at 90 degrees clockwise around the origin. I'm sorry, that's it's 90 degrees clockwise rotation. So 90 degrees clockwise rotation, you take your points, you go boop, you flip them, and then you make what was your x value, it is now your y value. You're going to make that end up being a negative. And I'm looking at that. The textbook is wrong about that. You do not flip them. X and y stay in the same place. The only thing that changes is the x value becomes its opposite. So if it was a negative, it's a positive. If it was a positive, it becomes a negative. We'll show you more on that. For a 180 degree rotation, this time we're going to take and leave them in the same orientation. X and y stays where they were, but now we're going to make both of them opposites of what they were. So if x was positive, it's going to become negative. If x was negative, it's going to become positive. And then for a 270 degrees clockwise rotation, this is a time that you're actually going to be flipping them. So you can see here that your x and your y swap places, and your new y value is going to be the opposite of what it was. They're not writing that properly either. Hopefully they'll do a little better showing it when we get into this a little further. A classmate claimed that the coordinates notation for the rotations shown will be the same even if the center of rotation is not the origin. Do you agree? No, you do not agree. The only time this pattern that they're giving you here works is if you're rotating around the origin. As long as you're rotating around the origin, a 90 degree clockwise, you flip the order of them, and then you take whatever the x value was, and you find the opposite of it. For a 180 degree clockwise, all you do is find the opposite of the x and the y value, and a 270 degree clockwise, you flip the order of them again, and then whatever the y value was, you find the opposite of it as well. Triangle DEF has the vertices that they have listed here. The triangle is rotated 90 degrees clockwise around the origin. What does that mean? It means that you're going to take and flip where your x and y are, and whatever the x is, you're going to take and put the opposite of it. Let's take a closer look at doing that. So, right here it says when rotating 90 degrees around the origin, the x coordinate of the image is the opposite of the y coordinate in the pre-image. The y coordinate of the image is going to be the same. Actually, no, we're going to do this different. That's going to be the same, and that's going to be opposite. So the notation for that is going to end up being that this is going to end up becoming a y value, and we're going to leave that as an accept, and this one is going to end up becoming the negative of the x value. Accept that, and maybe let's try that again. The negative x value, accept that, and check it, and it all checks. So let's put this into practice a little bit. I'm going to start, instead of starting with D, which would be confusing because you have the same sort of kind of number, you have opposites, -4 and 4, I'm going to start with E. And the pattern says we're going to flip the order of them, and whatever the x value was, we're going to do the opposite of it. So for E, it was -1, 2. So instead, I'm going to end up doing 2, -1. But I need the opposite of my x value. The opposite of -1, that is going to become +1. So now I'm going to have a +1 there. And then for this one right here, my f term, once again, we're going to flip the order of them. It was -1, 3, so it's going to become 3. Whoops, that's not what I said. It's going to become 1. It was -3, 1. Now it's going to become 1, -3. But once again, the number that was your x value, that is become its opposite. The opposite of a -1, that's going to be a +1. Now that we've looked at that with some numbers that are very different, let's take a look at it here. So for point D, it was -4. Now it's going to become 4, -4. We flip the order of them, and then the term that was your x term becomes its opposite. That's going to make it a +4. We're going to check that. We're going to hit accept, and everything works perfectly. Now all you have to do is graph those 3 new points on the coordinate plane, and you're done. And you can see here that now you have triangle F prime, D prime, E prime graphed, and that it is a reflection, a rotation of triangle FDE around the origin by 90 degrees. That's a whole lot easier than doing what we did earlier, where we did it all with a protractor and a ruler, isn't it? Now it's going to be your turn. This time they want you to take triangle ABC, which has these vertices, and rotate it 270 degrees around the origin in a clockwise manner. Then you're going to write that notation of the clockwise rotation, and then write the coordinates of the new triangle listed right down here. So I'm going to help you out. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the notation that you're going to be doing this. When you're doing a 270 degree rotation, what you're actually going to be doing is you're going to be swapping your y and your x location. And now for this one, your y value is going to be the opposite of what it was. I'm going to check that. That part checks. You take now and find these other 3 locate points right here. All right, once again, my pattern is going to be to go from x, y to -y, x. That's a pattern we're using. So point A was -4, 1. That means point A prime is going to be, we're going to flip the order of them. So I'm going to have a 1 and I'm going to have a 4, -4. And then the y value that is going to be the opposite of what it was. It was a +1. That's become a -1. My b value was -1, 4. That means that b prime is going to end up being, I'm going to go ahead and flip what I had there. I had this, it was 4, -1. And once again, what was the y value is going to become its opposite, making that a -4. My c value, that was a -2, 1. That means that my c prime, that is going to end up going to be a 1, -2, and the number that was the y value, it's going to flip again. Now we have to plug those new values into our answer key here. So the first one has become a -1, 4, -1, 4. We're going to accept that. The next one is going to be, let's find that again, it's going to be a -4, -1. Oh, that should have been -1, -4. I'm going to fix that. So let me go back over here and fix that one real quick. That should be a -1, -4. Alright, we're going to accept that. And then we're going to take and do a -4, -1 is the next point. So I'm going to do my parentheses, -4, -1. We're going to accept that. And then the last one is going to be a -1, -2. So we're going to take and plug those values in, parentheses, -1, -2, and accept that. We're going to hit our check button, and all 3 points are correct. If you were to graph that on the coordinate plane, you would find that it is a 270-degree rotation around the origin from the location of the original triangle. Next, we want to be able to describe a rotation. So it says use coordinate notation to describe the rotation and then determine the angle of the rotation. Assume that the rotation is clockwise about the origin. So that's going to be an important part for every rotation we're looking at. We're just saying that they're rotating around the origin and they're going in a clockwise rotation. So this is going to be easier than you think it is, fellas. Okay, I'm going to say if you figure out 1 point, you know them all pretty much. So the coordinates of your pre-image A is going to be at, well, we can say negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative 2. So that's going to be located at point negative 6, comma space, negative 2. And we're going to accept. I'll fill in the rest of those. Alright, I filled them all in for you. And we check our answers, and that part checks. Now we want to take a look and see what's the pattern. Well, the pattern is that the X and Y stays in the same location. So 6 stayed in the 6 spot, 2 stayed in the 2 spot. But the X and Y's became opposites of what they were. A negative became a positive, a negative became a positive. And that happened for all 3 of your points. So what we did is we went from XY to negative X, negative Y. What kind of rotation does that represent in the patterns that we have learned? That represents a rotation of 180 degrees, clockwise rotation about the origin. So the angle of rotation is going to be 180 degrees as well. That's it. That's all there is to doing that. If you know the numbers, the coordinates, you can look at it and determine what the rotation is going to be. This is the last practice problem of this lesson. So you guys are going to take and look at you have triangle ABC and you try A prime, B prime, C prime. And we want to know what type of rotation do you have going on around the origin here. Go ahead and pause the video, give you a hint. You need to start by writing down the coordinates of each triangle. So I went ahead and wrote down the coordinates of each of the points, A, B, C, and A prime, B prime, and C prime. And you notice that there is a very distinct pattern going on here, where I had my points, let's fix that again, where we had my points X, comma, Y, that all went to becoming new points of negative Y, comma, X. So we're going to jump back over here to our textbook, and we're going to plug in our new points of negative Y, comma, X, and that does all need to be in parentheses. So let me put a parentheses here and go to the end. Parentheses there, accept and check. That means that this is going to be a 270-degree rotation. So that's going to be it for this lesson. All you got to do now is do the homework that associates with it. The first part is going to be a little hard, but the rest of it, if you know the patterns, it should be really easy.